welcome back to Home Cooking Hacks, where we will teach you how to do great things in the kitchen without a lot of gizmos and gadgets. And today we're going to take some time to talk about bone broth or chicken broth. And this is a very nice recipe because of course there's that whole thing about, get some chicken noodle soup, it's so healthy for you, it's so good. The problem is in our current culture that is entirely lost on highly processed, deeply synthetic, artificially flavored broths. And really, when you talk about a good chicken noodle soup or whatever else, it's actually the bone broth that is the healthy part about the soup. And a lot of what we eat is soups in our culture just isn't the same. It doesn't have those health benefits. Some of the biggest aspects of broth is the collagen from it and a lot of the other things inside of the bone marrow that you are actually getting out. So what we're going to be doing here is one of the base recipes, how to make bone broth or chicken broth. And then of course I use this around here as a base for various soups. The two most popular ones I make are the chicken noodle soup and the ham and bean soup. And I also make a lot of gravies out of it. So this is great for gravy, so you don't have to get highly processed package of gravy mix from the store. Gravy is remarkably easy as long as you have a good bone broth mixture. So that's what we're going to be covering on today's quick basic video. Okay, so all of the kitchen equipment that we are going to need. We are going to need a crock pot. This is the most important thing. Of course, I'm using a larger crock pot for this recipe here. We need a teaspoon measure just so we can get a little bit of vinegar in there. I use 1 or 2 teaspoons. I'll probably end up using 2 here. I'm going to use some type of either slotted spoon. I found this is nice. This is actually just to scoop some of the larger bones out when we are done. And then I like to filter everything. This is just to make sure there are no bones left in my broth. I filter everything through a mesh filter. You can use a bigger one. I kind of need to get a new one of these. This one's kind of getting old and falling apart a little bit. But I'm going to use a mesh filter. And then I'll usually use some type of pitcher just to filter things, either filter things to or filter things through. And then I'm going to use a variety of jars. So this is actually going to make about half the crock pot plus about 4 cups of broth. So I'm going to use half of it. Anytime I make this, I always use half of it right away to make a good soup. And then I use the rest of it, just freeze it down into individual cups. And then I can use those cups. I can either combine them all together to make another soup, or I can use those to make gravies or other things down the road. So this is all the equipment that we need. Okay, so one of the great things about this chicken broth recipe is that we're utilizing and we're not really wasting any food. So your main ingredient is obviously chicken bones. Now, I've thawed these out. You generally don't want to thaw them out. I've done that just because I have collected way too many bones. I've wanted to actually make this a little while ago and I just haven't had the chance. So I'm only going to use part of this bag. So you want to use less than a gallon bag of chicken bones. This is great because chicken with bone in it costs a lot less than chicken without bone. And you get the same meal component out of it. I only pay like $4 for, 5 or so meals of chicken with the bone in it, but it'd be over twice that for the skinless, boneless stuff. And with skin and bone, it's healthier chicken. And then you get a chance to save your bones and make bone broth out of it for its benefits. You're going to need some vinegar. This is going to help to just make the water a little bit more acidic so it can actually leach out the parts out of the bones that we need. And I'm going to do some parsley. Parsley is actually, it sounds like, well, why are we seasoning it now? It's not as much of a seasoning as it is, there's something about parsley that will help develop the bone broth. So that is actually an ingredient you'll find in most of them. Of course, we have water. I'm going to use purified water. I have a 5-stage reverse osmosis is what I use, so I fill this gallon jug up with that every day. About that, let's talk about the missing component, salt. Some of your bone broth recipes are going to put the salt in it when you're making it. I don't. You can do it either way. I end up adding the salt when I'm either making it into gravy or making it into soup, because you might add different types of salts for each one. So those are our individual components. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready for probably the easiest, most overlooked, and probably best recipe ever. Again, just broth is so good for you. It's a great base for a lot of different soups, and it is so easy to make. It's just, cooking has just become a lost art. Again, I'm getting my chicken at half the price as the skinless, boneless stuff, and I'm freezing down the bones. Now again, you want to do it when you have less than this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add bones to the crock pot. Actually, I might end up using all of this. Yeah, sure, let's use all of this. May as well. If you use more bones, you'll probably end up getting a thicker broth. So I might get more out of this because I'll kind of make it more concentrated. So discard your bag now. I'm not going to reuse the bags. So now what I want to do is I just want to cover it with water. So again, I use purified water. I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference. I just like to use the purified for anything that's more than just cooking or anything. So it looks like we'll probably end up doing about, not quite a whole gallon, pretty close. So that was a full gallon. So it's a little bit less. So I'd say, easily about 3.5 liters. All right, we want to add our vinegar. And so our vinegar is, you can use 2 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons. I'm just going to go ahead and do 1, I think, right now. Let's do 1 tablespoon of our vinegar. And then I'm just going to sprinkle in some parsley flakes. Now, if you can get raw parsley as well, that also works. It doesn't much matter. I'm just going to take the cap off there. Okay, turn your crock pot to high, put the lid on, and we're going to come back in the morning. So that's it for now. Just leave this sit over morning, and then, of course, warning, your entire kitchen is going to smell so good when you get up in the morning. It's going to make you want to eat extra. So that's it. Now the next step, of course, we're going to take all the bones out. So either utilizing this guy here, also, I didn't grab it earlier, but I will oftentimes use these as well, just some tongs. And then we're just going to pour it out of here. We're going to filter it and pour it, filter it, and use it. So we'll check back in the morning. Okay, so it is now morning, and this is what this is going to look like. So if we pull the lid off there, you can see it should be boiling, bubbling, and just kind of look at the chicken bones like that. Now, one of the biggest ways we're going to tell this worked well is the bones now should be extremely brittle. And so we'll go ahead and have a look at what that's going to look like. So now we're just going to turn off the crock pot for now. And I'm just going to use my metal tongs here. And what you should be able to do is grab the bones, and maybe not right in the very center, but they should be pretty brittle overall. You'll actually kind of see that it is kind of thick and hazy, so you can see right there how that bone just kind of breaks into little pieces there just by squeezing it. Let me grab it again. You can kind of see it just kind of squeezes and cracks open and stuff. That's how you can tell it's done. So now we're just going to remove all the bones and all of the other stuff from here. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab this stuff and move it into the trash can. Okay, now we have most of that out. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to filter it, and I'm going to go ahead and filter it into, in this case I'm going to use a cup measure. I'm going to filter it into a, just like a basic pitcher. So I just have a wire mesh up here, and then I'm just gonna filter all this through. You wanna do this, it doesn't matter if we're filtering out the parsley, we can add that back in later if we want to. But what we wanna make sure we do is we wanna filter out all of the bones. There's gonna be some little maybe bone chunks. We don't want any of that kind of stuff in our soups, of course. So there's even, I'm missing some bones even, so. Filter all of this, and then we'll proceed to the next step. Now, once it's getting full, I know from experience here that this is actually going to produce me enough to have at least 4 cups extra after I have enough to have my main soup. So I'm just going to put these into mason jars. Hopefully my mason jars don't crack, and you do not want to overfill them because we're going to freeze these. Lost several mason jars overfilling these, so make sure you're putting in just under a cup. So of course in the jars here, these are the 1 cup size jars, and I'm going to fill them up to, here's your 8-ounce line is right up here. So I want to fill it pretty much right up to that 8-ounce line. That makes sure I have a full cup. You don't want to go any further than that. And of course they will expand, so that's a little too high. That one's just a touch low, so I'll just kind of share a little bit with that. Now these you're going to want to cool them down before you tighten the lid. So I'm going to put the lid on. I'm not going to tighten the lid. I'm just going to put it on enough that, just enough so that it's not going to fall off, but it's kind of still loose. I'm going to do that with all of the lids, and then we're going to set these in the refrigerator to cool, and then when they're cool enough, I will then transfer them into the freezer. Looks like this is probably going to be okay here. So the better form, the more practical form is to pour, of course, away from you. If there's a spill, it'll cause a mess, but it's not going to cause physical harm. All right, so that should be perfect for 1 soup, and this pitcher is completely full. And then just discard all of what was in that. So now I have 4 cups of broth, I have a full pitcher, and that is how you can go about making your chicken broth. So there you have it. There is our bone broth. Like I said, you can use your broth for any types of soups you want to make that are chicken broth based, or you can use them for some gravies, and there's probably some other things you can use the broth for as well. Let us know in the description down below the types of things you would like to see with this bone broth. Thank you for watching this home cooking hacks video. You can help support the channel by checking us out on Patreon, patreon.com/TomM, T-O-M-M. I also have my own unified portal which supports all of my separate channels, and that is called Think Life Media, thinklifemedia.com, and take a look at the links in the description down below for anything else you might want to help support us with. So thanks for coming along on this home cooking hacks, and get in the kitchen and get cooking.